As long as we got the camera rolling,
It's
right?
going. We're going.
All right. Well, thank you. Welcome. We'll open our meeting at 2:59. That's going to help later. I feel it.
Extra minute.
All right. So, thank you all for being here. You have some materials in front of you. I provided these yesterday over email, but you have hard copies here. The last sheet that this one is an updated version of the last two sheets in the larger stapled packet, just so that's not confusing. Let's begin with our first agenda item, approving the minutes from September 27th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I have a comment.
Okay,
on the
can
minutes.
I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Great, second.
I'll second.
I had a question on the minutes.
Yes, we'll discuss them now.
Okay. It says in the, on the first page, under the subcommittees, that the governance subcommittee needs to get its comments in for the PowerPoint. I thought that they were submitted already at the time of the meeting. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they were.
Okay. I don't have a clear recollection of that, but
I know that they were.
they were?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's ask that those be stricken from the minutes. I think it's the line, it was noted that the governance subcommittee needs to get its comments in for the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think there was stuff for every committee at that point.
Any other errors, omissions, changes? No? All right. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay. Great. Public comments. We do have two new public comments this week. They're in your sheet one of them starts, the subject choice in the menu is double-barreled. Like on page 4, I think. Page 5. So this comment is from Maria Corrales. The subject choice in the menu is double-barreled. They are distinct inquiries resulting in ambiguity, allowing non-residents that pay taxes to vote and allowing 16-year-old residents to vote are very distinct. This makes public unaware and exposes them to wrong choices. First, we have thousands of foreign companies setting up businesses in the United States, which also means they pay taxes. In addition, they have non-resident foreign employees that pay taxes as well, because they live nearby too. What purpose does it serve allowing foreigners who are not citizens of the United States of America the opportunity to vote, locally, state, or federal? Second, the Constitution of the United States of America, including the state of Vermont Constitution, says, and clearly, you must be a citizen of the United States to vote and minimum age 18. Also, Vermont Constitution has further parameters, must be a legal resident, and the definition is clarified. Why does age play such a role? Because there are important practical considerations in decision-making. National Institute of Medicine has numerous papers on this framework acknowledging that analytical/deliberative and affect-rich processes shift with age. Voting is a tool and in the wrong hands can damage. Perfect analogies. Vermont does not allow anyone to purchase a gun, cigarettes, or alcohol until they reach age 21. Why not lower this as well? Because it would be irresponsible. So I think there's two things that I see here. One is just about the form on the site and that option being unclear. And then the other is a handful of comments about voting. So I think the admin committee suggested that this go to the voting group.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And then I took a minute and found the research that she was citing, and so I've left some notes for you from that paper here. One piece of this that I thought was a good point actually is that the charge does indicate that we should evaluate whether non-citizen taxpayers be allowed to vote. I think as the voting group and as this full committee, we've sort of oriented around allowing non-citizen residents to vote. Those are two different things in my mind.
I would say that we did have a discussion about, you had mentioned taxpayers specifically in one of our discussions. And, obviously you can not live here but own a business, and then that would give that person potentially the right to vote because they're a taxpayer. And that is something that I think is being looked at and discussed in that subcommittee. So to Maria's point, I mean, there's a lot of layers to this particular issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also the theme, like everything, there's different types of taxes. There's different types of residents, both legal and undocumented. There's, you know what I mean? So I think this is to that point where the language that we use can sometimes be misinterpreted or too vague for productive conversation. So I think just moving forward, we've come to an understanding, I think, of where we stand, around certain buckets and everything, but we'll just have to do a good job defining and communicating what we mean by non-citizens. That we mean non-citizens who are here legally and pay taxes because of that.
Who live here or who pay taxes, or is that still an open question for people?
I think as the person who's going to be presenting to the public on this issue, this was one thing that with that particular subcommittee I was going to bring up today anyway, so I'm glad it's already out there. I wanted to make sure that how this particular question is being addressed, that whether that needs a vote by this whole committee, whether we need to spend time today to hash that out, but that was definitely on my list of to-dos today.
Okay. Well, let's I guess have some time to discuss that a little later, whether it's during the voting group or when we discuss the
Perfect.
public forum.
Perfect.
Great. The second comment that we received this week is actually right after it. The first one under additional considerations here by Jacqueline Matz.
I know that lady.
In addition to efforts to enfranchise more residents, please consider making voting in municipal elections more accessible by mailing ballots to all active registered voters in the town for all local elections in accordance with 17 VSA subsection 2680 G1. All mail elections allow voters more options to cast their ballot and may increase turnout as well as lower election administration costs. And she included some citations here to that legislative act and some research on all mail voting. Again, I think the admin group felt like this was appropriate for the voting group to look at. Any initial thoughts on this now?
I think I mentioned before, coming from Arizona, voting here this was the first time I voted in person. So I'm very familiar with mail-in ballots. Doesn't mean it's going to cause any less headaches for those in charge of elections. But definitely something we'll look at with the subcommittee again.
Yeah, I have friends in my life from multiple parties who are in favor of this, like in the Montpelier world, so I know that there's a lot of bipartisan support for it. However, I will note, and maybe we can double check notes or with Cassie, I think Cassie said that for mail-in ballot costs, it's shouldered by the municipalities themselves at present. Again, not saying that should make us, choose one way or the other, but that surprised me.
The cost, however, was not of substantial, correct? We're looking at roughly $1,700, I think was
That's what I
off the top of my
remember,
head, right?
yeah.
So, like, to your point, costs is a consideration, but not the direct thing. And then to see a cost that is, on the grand scheme of a budget, a very small line item, that's another consideration
Yeah.
too.
So maybe we can go back to Cassie or double check.
And we do already mail ballots to all registered voters for federal elections, right?
State does.
State.
The state
State
does.
Yeah.
Okay, so the state shoulders that cost, but it is part of the voting process in town. And our local elections are included on that ballot usually, right?
Correct, and that's how we're able
Yeah.
to split that cost.
Right. Okay.
So remember, our local elections don't occur, they occur in March, whereas the national election occurs in November, so they're separate.
There are some local elections on the
Board of
ballot in
Civil-
November,
Board of Civil
right?
Authority.
And
Civil Authority.
Justice of
Or
the Peace?
Justices of
Yeah,
the Peace.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
That's
yes.
generally the only one.
Yeah.
Okay.
How difficult would it be to change the date of the local elections?
State, well, you'd have to create a change in the charter. State law is March town meeting, basically. Those towns that meet other times
Gotcha.
have a charter that allows them to do so.
Isn't North Bennington one of those that meets at a different time?
I think North Bennington meets another time. Old Bennington meets in May.
Yeah.
Is there any reason off the top of your head why we couldn't have our local elections also be timed with federal elections for both cost and voter turnout purposes?
I think it would create some initial havoc.
Havoc, yeah, is a good word,
Trying
maybe.
to, well, remember, we're now in the process of developing the budget for consideration by the board in January, by consideration by the voters in March,
Right,
which takes place July 1.
right.
There was a time when Bennington actually the select board considered the budget in May, which was closer to July 1. So you'd have to think about how that
Right.
gets changed if you're going to vote in November. I mean, when you're going to be voting in November for a budget that doesn't take effect until
Right.
July, the following July.
Right.
We're already projecting costs out 18 months. You're going to now add
Now you're adding.
another 6 months to that.
Fair.
I mean, we're great, but we're
And it's sort of
Just wanted to throw you
tradition.
another challenge. What are you
I
talking
feel like
about?
it's like a Vermont thing.
Yeah, town
Again,
meeting day.
I'm always like, what's tradition, but like it's like first Tuesday, March, Vermont town, like that's the
I'm not here to step on
drill.
that.
So
Yeah, it is like near and dear
kind
to
of
many
a
people.
thing.
Great. More? No? Great. Look forward to hearing from the voting group on both of those. Okay. Hear from the subcommittees. Can we start with the admin group? Anything from admin group this week?
Other than entertaining the comments that were submitted, that was pretty much the top items that we discussed.
Great. Anything new from voting?
Did reach out to a few people. Was unable to get the meetings to happen this week, so I'm hoping that those are now going to be scheduled next week. Other than my own personal research, we did not meet as a group this week. I think everybody's been pretty pressed on time. Looking forward to wrapping up some loose ends. If we wanted to talk about the non-citizen citizen thing, I think now would be a good time, because I'd like to be in a better situation than I currently feel about talking about that specific issue
Sure.
in public. So
Sure. Yeah, let's have that conversation.
To clarify, are you saying, or are we trying to clarify whether it's resident or non-resident?
I think we're trying to clarify resident or non-resident,
Okay.
and citizen, non-citizen versus legal citizen.
Okay.
Legal.
Well,
Citizen
just
or
the
resident?
legality of their status here versus we talked about undocumented versus documented. Would be more specific.
Yeah.
And it is confusing because to me, when like the word resident in the charge, I automatically like assumed it was resident of Bennington. But in the immigration world, LPRs are legal permanent residents, and those are the residents of the U.S. who might be a refugee with a social security card. So the word resident, sort of, depending on where you are, like is it's a legal definition,
There you go.
right? So
And
It's worth-
and there's a lot to consider, right? Like you have the DACA
yeah.
situation. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, so I apologize in advance. But what's their status for voting? I just want to make sure that before I step up there and speak on behalf of everyone,
Sure.
that everybody has had the ability to partake in this discussion. Because it's a dynamic, I think this specific question is probably the most hot button topic question of the entire charge that we're tasked with.
Can I say my
Yeah.
view?
Yeah, go for
it.
What I am most interested in, I think I really remain open-minded across all committees and like all topics still, that unlike Winooski, at least, that has the widest, the broadest, anyone who lives in Winooski who's over 18 can vote. That's it. For me, what would be most interested in voting in favor of would be legal permanent residents of the United States who are also residents of Bennington. So those are folks from my understanding, with social security cards who can work legally just the same as, myself, and would be over 18 or over.
And live in Bennington.
And live and are also not only LPRs, but residents of Bennington.
And then I guess my first question would be in regards to our conversation with Cassie, what is an acceptable form of identification for same-day voting? Or, specifically same-day voting, because that seems to be an issue that she talked about in terms of staffing and process. And then
So those folks, my understanding, and maybe there's Secretary of State stuff and whatever, all of those folks have the same IDs as us. I know, legal permanent residents or who have driver's licenses, maybe they have a birth certificate that's in another line. You know what I mean? But like they have licenses, they have utility bills, they have leases with landlords. Like all of that stuff is relevant to them. Just like this. So I don't think I don't see there a difference. But again, I'm like I want feedback, or I'm not the expert necessarily.
I think I'm on the same page as you are in terms of who I'd feel comfortable extending the vote to, namely legal permanent residents of the United States, then also residents of Bennington. In terms of the identification that they provide to register, I think I remember Cassie saying to us that she can't require them to show ID at the polls or when they register. I'd feel more comfortable that way. Because there's no mechanism for us to verify, that they do in fact live in Bennington without having that ID. But
Them or anyone else, for that
right,
matter.
right. But for U.S. citizens that are over 18 that are entered into the state's election management system, the state validates their eligibility to vote. The town doesn't do that ourselves, the state does that for us. But we can't enter minors or non-citizens into that system. So that's been a little bit of a sticking point for me, that we're considering approving expanding voting access to people with the understanding that there's no mechanism to validate that they're eligible to vote.
So I guess the first question that comes to mind with what you just said in mind is, as we're also being tasked with the charge of potentially allowing 16 and up to vote, and as you just said, only 18 eligible is being verified via the state for the town, and that we would not have a mechanism to verify 16 to 18 for these legal permanent residents of the United States who also live in Bennington. We don't have that ability. Would we then be passing a charge or a charter change that allows 16 and up to vote, but excluding a specific group of potentially legal permanent residents who also live in Bennington? And then what are the legalities of that? Should we pass that in the charter, and then all of a sudden we've got, 10, 16-year-olds who are legal permanent residents, but we don't have the ability to verify that, or they don't actually live here, I should say, and then they vote. Like, it sounds like a mess.
It sounds like
No,
there's
I
a
hear what
room
you're
for
saying.
voter fraud there. Is that what
I
you're
want to be
saying?
clear
Yeah.
though, like, I'm not trying to apply this logic to one population and not another. This
No,
concern
exactly.
exists for me for both
I'm
populations.
just pointing out that there is now a designated loophole in our ability to mechanize that security and
But when I
Though-
take the voter pledge, I have to attest that my statements are true. So that put the onus on me. I agree. I don't see how we wouldn't want to compel Cassie to ask for paperwork at the poll. There's a mechanism already in place when I took that pledge to register to vote, that if I'm fraudulent and it's discovered, I am criminally liable. The town is not liable.
And I
I have a question, but would you be registering to vote? Because isn't voter registration like kind of a national thing, or is that more, can you register to vote just for the town election?
Well, Vermont allows same-day voter
Voter
registration.
registration. So, but that's what I'm saying. Could you register to vote, or would they have to come and do basically like a walk-in situation?
currently walk in.
Well, no, you have to register. If right now, if you're not registered to vote, and then come November 5th, you decide on that day, I would like to vote. You can show up at the polls, say,
Yep.
my name is such and such, here are the last 4 digits of my social security number. They write it down, they give you a provisional ballot. You're allowed to vote that day.
And
So-
the vote is not questioned unless, say, a candidate would raise that question through their research, is what I had asked Cassie.
Yeah.
And so,
So,
go ahead.
a couple points from both Cassie and then also my own view is one, there is going to be a new system that the Secretary of State's office is like procuring. I don't think we got an end date from Cassie about when that new system is. She's excited about it. It's much more, I think she said, dynamic and flexible to all the like nuts and bolts of what goes into a ballot and counting and all that stuff. So that's great. I mean, and I think would lend itself to some of the imperfections of like data quality and everything that elections currently face and will, you know. Two is we talked for probably half an hour about voter fraud and her experiences with it, prefaced by you have a lot of people on the news saying that like it's all fraud and other people saying like it never happens, right? And her experience was she has seen it a couple times in her long career, overseeing dozens and dozens of elections. So to me, that was actually really reassuring, and it was a nice sort of like unbiased perspective, and you know, firsthand experience. And then I would add to a similar around like the voting pledge in my work with immigrants and refugees, which spans from literally working for ICE to working for the Department of Justice to volunteering with immigrants and refugees. The last people who are going to conduct voting fraud are people who are immigrants here, because when you apply for your naturalization papers, that is the first thing they're like. It would be just like the dumb, like I can't think of anything dumber personally. So again, I can't say that if 1 million legal permanent residents vote, like, you know what I mean, like it could never happen. But to me, like the idea that someone's gonna try to do that would be so silly, as well as knowing that the average person who is a legal permanent resident here is like by a factor of 5 so much less likely than the average American like to be arrested and everything. They're very lawful people. They're here legally, and they know it's a special situation. So that's my.
But 16 and 18-year-olds aren't so.
I'm not so much about.
My personal view is as long as there is, like, the system is in place, these methods of verification allow you to vote. This is a very clear, you need to meet this regulation to vote. And as long as the same day voting doesn't put at risk the regulations and the validation, then I'm fine with it. I want to be careful in regards to any charter changes in terms of voting, that we're not taking away. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, we're going to open the door for a million people to come in and vote. Like it's not what I'm trying to say. I just want to be careful that the decision that we make doesn't add to or lessen our ability to control what Cassie has done or cause problems for the election system or department here, because it's only gotten worse in terms of that particular issue.
I have a question. Has there been an expressed desire from this community that they want to vote? I mean, does it? I just like we've had a couple comments that have been submitted to us. They've all been about the age change,
Right.
but I haven't seen anything, and so I was just curious. Is there a desire from that community?
I asked her that specific question about, is there a bunch of people, like I used the signs and pitchforks, like let us vote for both the age, and her comment was she was not aware of a consolidated effort. Now that being said, I'm sure when you talk to people on an individual basis, I know if I was in the situation, I would love to vote.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say in my sample size of 3 people I run into, the answer is 3 out of 3 yes.
Okay.
And also I have been meaning to circle back to ECDC, who I reached out to a month ago. They said they wanted to submit comments, and have yet to do so, but I heard that they were like working on it or had a bunch ready or something. So I hope that we see that in the next week. I don't know, maybe they just...
I would just reach back out to them. They're super busy over there. I see them all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Carolyn, do you know if the new state system will actually enhance the verification opportunities? Or will it stay within the same parameters that the state already has?
It definitely adds features. A lot of them. I don't know for sure. My hope would be definitely if it's a more flexible program, and Burlington, Winooski, Montpelier, which are big towns with big populations, have already adopted such a change. But I didn't hear that for sure from Cassie. Maybe we should go to the Secretary of State and ask.
Cassie that had mentioned it to us, or was it Clerk and Winooski.
Both.
Cassie definitely mentioned it.
I think we talked about it more with Cassie than I talked to the Winooski clerk.
Okay.
I can't remember if it was just more expansive in terms of like the back end capabilities, or if it had anything to do with strengthening verification or simplifying that. I want to say it was mostly a back end, like their ability to absorb data and maybe
That was a huge part of it.
maybe divide the data into more finite or granular.
What I remember hearing clearly was that it would accommodate other types of voters that have been approved in other towns, right? We would be able to put 16 and 17-year-olds in it. We would be able to put non-citizens in. I don't remember hearing anything about it improving the verification of their eligibility. But I think right now the challenge is that if you're not in that system, you don't get verified at all.
Right. And the problem with the old system, we found out, was the whole state had to update the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
We were running on crap,
So in Winooski, they have this new system, and they allow everyone to vote.
They're doing it without the system. The system is always statewide.
Well, this new thing that Cassie was
It's a new state system that
Right.
they're
working on.
looking at.
It's like a software.
Working
So- It's like a
on,
ballot
yeah.
software.
So are they
But it's-
using it in other places, or it's soon to be everywhere?
Soon to be
I-
everywhere.
Okay, I was going to ask if they had how they liked it.
definition.
That was my question.
Yeah.
How's it
Well,
going?
and for some definition of soon, like soon
Yeah.
could be
Right.
few
in
years.
8 years,
Yeah.
you know? 'Cause
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's very, that particular, like that system is very centralized at the Secretary of State level,
Yeah.
and then they roll it to everywhere, so.
That's kind of what I thought might
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
All right, I
Did
think
we
this
answer
was
your question?
good, right? I wanted to get back to that
Yeah.
because I don't want to spend too much time deliberating voting, but do you feel like you have, what
I
you
mean,
need to
unless
speak on
anybody,
this?
I've heard you and Carolyn and myself kind of voice our opinions of that. If anybody has anything to add or that wasn't hit, then just let me know and I can kind of form that. I haven't heard from you at all on this today.
Well, I like to think I was open-minded, but I still think you have to be a citizen to vote, period. And I still feel that way now. I just think that even with new software, which we're not really sure what type of items in there, I think that it's still open to voter fraud, regardless of people taking oaths. I'm a little more skeptical. Maybe it's because I'm accountant. I don't know why. I don't have the same optimism of something like that. That's kind of where I am.
And you're
And on the.
you're
age-
not an unheard population in Bennington or anywhere. There's a lot of people feel that way.
I don't want to be an
Yeah.
outlier, and I don't want to,
No, that's not-
obviously,
no, I just
Yeah.
want to.
but I have strong feelings about it.
And let me ask, do you want to go?
Oh, and the age one? Did you have any thoughts?
The age, I actually, I think that it would be, based on the comments that were given to us and what we've discussed here, I am not opposed to that at all.
Okay. Can I just ask, is there anyone here that thinks it would be appropriate, that would carry the banner for allowing non-resident taxpayers to vote?
No,
No,
not myself.
absolutely not.
Yeah, okay.
They don't, like people who don't reside within Bennington, that's what you're saying, right? They
Right.
pay taxes here, but they don't reside here.
right.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I think there's some strong
clear.
consensus there. I think at the forum, it's probably premature to say like, this is what the committee is gonna recommend.
Yeah.
But I think you can say, particularly, if somebody raises this point, like, we are not considering allowing non-resident taxpayers.
Yeah, I
to
think
vote.
when you said that, kind of the thought that came to my head was actually proactively saying at this time we're not considering non-resident taxpayers being included in this charter.
Right. But we are considering still, yeah.
I mean, I pay taxes when I go to Spain on vacation and like buy, you know, like whatever, you know, it's
I mean,
like,
I
no,
think,
that's not.
I mean, like, in terms of
intention.
like my concerns, I'm much less concerned about a voter fraud component than I would be about non-resident taxpayers impacting the town that we live in, simply because they had, you know, and it doesn't have to just be like the foreign business owner kind of person, you know, that out there could be the person who lives out of state, whose their only interest is making money off of Bennington residents.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
So I'm much more concerned about that component than the other.
Okay, great. Thank you, voting. Let's go to properties. Anything new from properties this week?
We met with Dan and Paul again, and I think we're distilled down, or we're getting distilled down on being ready to present our proposals to the whole committee to talk about what we're going to recommend for a charter change and what we're going to recommend other considerations. We did ask Paul to give us some the numbers, the newest numbers, the best visibility of vacant properties in Bennington. Understandably, there is a registry in town, but it's voluntary, so understandably, residential properties are very sparse on here, but we have a pretty good representation of known commercial vacant buildings. And so this gives us some current, up-to-date data that we can now work with, and that's very appreciated.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to add in our discussion, and I just kind of wanted to put this to the charter committee as a whole, in terms of the registry, there was kind of, you know, a thought about, do we post the vacant commercial buildings publicly? And one of the biggest components to like why we wouldn't consider doing that is the consideration that might just be like, oh, these commercial buildings are vacant, come rob them or
Vandalize them. I'm strongly against this as a business owner.
Yeah.
Not that they should be.
I just wanted to bring that to this committee so that we could have a 2-minute discussion or whatever is needed in regards to that. If anybody feels the opposite of that, but that was kind of the discussion we had in regards to that.
I don't know the legality of this, if it's possible to maintain that registry without it being public information. Like, for example, like would it be like subject to like a FOIA request or something like that?
It's a difference between what is public and what is published. So like anybody can ask for that information, but it's different to placard a building
Right.
or post it up on your website
Right.
prominently. So you know, there's different
Yeah.
ways. I mean, obviously anybody who wants the information, they can have it. It's just whether we make it broadly known to folks who aren't seeking that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like making it easy to find is different than like having to come in and ask for it, you know? Or so I can't just like pop on the website like, hey, let's see what's vacant tonight.
Or, I mean, the process of having to document your requests in terms of like, this is the person who requested this information, so that if the following week that building's vandalized,
It's like, hey,
you know, hey, you just kind of asked about this last week, and oh, by the way, it just got vandalized. You know?
From the perspective of a charter change that would create this registry, would the charter say like the town shall maintain a registry of vacant abandoned properties, and then it would be like on the ordinance side to like not publish that, or
We
like
don't need a
where's
charter
the-
to do any of that work.
Okay.
This
It's
came
not really a
accidental.
charter concern, it's more recommendations to the select board on charter change, on ordinance
On
changes.
ordinance changes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, is most of what we've been talking about is actually an ordinance. It's within the power of the select board currently, so a lot of our efforts seem to be directing, you know, recommendations.
Okay. Yeah.
And there is a current ordinance that mirrors another example that was provided to us by BCRC that was really exciting to me because of how comprehensive it is. And again, it's quite similar to Benning's current one, but I think it's also a matter of resources and enforcement, as well as maybe amending it to be a little more stickish in a few ways. But I think it's not a charter issue to change. It'd be more about public pressure and getting the select board to prioritize an act.
Yeah, thank you for saying resources, because that's one thing that did come up. I mean, there's obviously some things we can do. Right now, the facilities and properties department, they're overextended as it is. Even me asking for that list of, the known vacancies right now, that somebody had to dig those numbers up. I could see the pain looked on the person's face when I said, yeah, I'd like to have them. And that was just looking up something as simple as that. So anything that we have to, anything that we're going to send, and we'll send it to the select board and they'll decide what they want to do. But I think one of the things we have to also consider is some of this doesn't come cheap. Would we be talking hiring another full-time employee just to go around for, like, with a registry to, and quite frankly, it'd be physically impossible anyway.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for your efforts, Pam.
I just had a question. I'm just curious. So, for the properties, has anything that you've been investigating or researching lent itself to be a charter change?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. We're looking at property lien priority.
Okay.
Definitely is going to be, we're going to present to the whole committee as a suggested charter change.
Oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we came up with 8 what we thought were great ideas.
Yeah.
And it's oh, that's an ordinance. Oh, that's a state. Oh, that's
Yeah.
a dumb idea. You know what I mean? You're down to one. To be fair.
No. I'm just.
But that's a very impactful one. Just speaking from someone who has to deal with these issues. If that attention was brought to that, even if it didn't get passed in our charter.
Well, and that's to his point. We don't know how successful it will be sending it to the select board, voting, up the ladder, but it seems to be something that is necessary, impactful, and needs to be heard regardless of, the success.
Gotcha.
I was just reading through this, and I would just like to make a suggestion maybe to the property committee. The Better Bennington Corporation has a subcommittee, the Downtown Vitality Committee. I am on that committee, but there's some much more informed members of that committee that are really great resources. And I would suggest maybe meeting with them, because they have, one of the things we tackle is all the vacant buildings on Main Street. It's one of the major things that committee looks at, and how to attract businesses into them, how to hold those business owners accountable, how to get them to do things like clean their windows, clean up their property fronts, so to try and maintain our downtown and our Main Street.
That's perfect.
And looking at that list, I was afraid was going to be the answer, is the majority of those businesses and the commercial properties are within our downtown district. So I would just really suggest maybe to that subcommittee to reach out to the BBC.
I did about 3 weeks ago. At the same time, I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Bennington Alliance. I didn't hear back we haven't gotten comments from any of them. But if you have individuals,
I can hook it up. We haven't met.
Okay.
Downtown Vitality hasn't met. We also unfortunately lost a BBC member not too long ago, and the head of the Downtown Vitality Group subcommittee is her husband. So
okay.
he postponed for a couple months, which is fine. I just saw him recently, and Michael Keane, and he will. He said we're gonna get one soon, so I'm sure I could help arrange that.
Okay,
for you.
I'll follow up with you. And
Yeah.
we can make that.
But we do a lot of work around this area.
That's perfect. That's exactly the type of people we wanted to talk to. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll hear more from properties in the upcoming meeting. let's hear from CPARB. Any updates from CPARB this week? Or the CPARB, our CPARB group, not.
Was there any, did you hear any comments from our last meeting? Was anything sent your way, or?
I didn't get any more from either of the groups that we met with.
Okay.
I did have a brief conversation with the chair, the president, something like that, of the NAACP. You know, I think we heard some of the same concerns about CPOR being largely struggling to achieve a lot of the goals that have been set out for them. Nothing really groundbreaking there. You know, at this point, I'm thinking, and this may be relevant to some of the work that Properties Group is doing as well. If we're generally agreed that there's not like a constructive charter change to pursue here, it feels sort of outside of our scope here to continue just interviewing people and meeting with stakeholders and trying to like come up with you know, improvements to how that board functions in this town. If it's no longer in the purview of a charter change, then I think our work is done there.
Yeah, that was going to be a question I had, was, you know, after this first open public forum, you know, maybe we'll get some things to consider there at the forum, and I still want to be open-minded about that, even with properties and, you know.
Yeah.
But if there's nothing that is of substance to change our minds on us, you know, like what you just mentioned, I mean, are we good with putting that together and kind of putting that committee to bed? Maybe the properties as well, because they seem to be the two that are kind of getting there. You know.
Yeah, and I think like we've spoken about previously, you know, anything that's come out of the work that we've put in, I think we should certainly put in that report. But I don't think it makes sense to go digging for more.
Yeah, I don't want to tell them how to run their committee.
Right.
Like that's, you know, I really want that to be their own thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like giving them the respect to figure it out also, and deal with their own process.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with that. I don't think there's too much room to anything really to go there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, no?
Sorry, I think just one comment. I think you're right. Well, you know, we'll see what happens, I guess, at the public comment, or even a second one, to be honest. But I guess a week ago, I thought we had a really good discussion, and I learned a lot. I'll say in the days after, I also did my own reading on blah blah blah, which I said I was going to do, and I was pretty shocked at some of the tense history or controversy that has surrounded CPARB since its inception, ranging from you know, real governance and institution type things to the actions of particular leaders in the community across town government, the police, and CPARB itself, and then I would say like the more activist community. And so I feel like I just learned a lot about those dynamics, and now I feel better informed, though I still don't think that I didn't know that there's a charter change to be made. But I just wanted to raise that because that was a big, to me, opened my eyes a lot, and it wasn't something that we discussed, and it did come up last Friday, so to share that. And specifically I'm talking about some of the ACLU. There's at least one active case that was open last summer, and perspectives that I heard from someone I know in the community who's a person of color and very aware of common harassment, especially of people in the Latino community by Bennington police, and the fact that more than one complaint has been filed with CPARB, though we only maybe heard about one from the police, and just an ongoing mistrust.
One of the problems that I feel like we've heard about a lot in this process is, one, you cannot file complaints directly with CPARB. You have to file them through the police department. Otherwise, they do not get reviewed, and they have no grounds to review on based on how their process works. Which sometimes I feel like is unfortunate. I've heard otherwise that might not be true. That there are other ways to make complaints, but that's what I think. There's an education, which really boils down to, I think, one of their biggest problems, which revolves around education about what they're doing and how to do it and what they can help with and what they cannot. And the data that we've talked about at length last week, that there has been no access to data. So all of the reasons that CPARs were formed, like, we don't even know. They're supposed to be reviewing this data that's going to tell us, and hold the police accountable. And when what we heard from the police chief, there was a lot of training around traffic stops and how to fill out your forms properly, and there's a lot of paperwork problems going on, we were told. But I agree that as a resident of this town, I would really like to see that data, and I feel like that's, I really hope that that's what happens,
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine, again, I don't know if they should, I don't have a charter thought. I just wanted to name the fact that I learned a lot since Friday, and it's also not lost on me that I believe most of the individuals we've talked to today have been white, or people in sort of my majority demographics, and that the inception, I think, and the impetus for creating such a group to be involved in police work goes beyond, I think, a lot of maybe those demographics, of course. And so I just wanted to name that I've talked to some people since, and they're overall really disappointed. I think a lot of people are disappointed from all backgrounds about the lack of action, and I don't see a solution, and we can move on. But I think there's a lot there beyond the perspectives of CPARB members and the police and the town.
I remember watching a video, somebody was talking, it was an open forum regarding the CPARB board and the demographics of the board and how obvious that was in regards to just representation being an issue. There's age issue, just on a whole bunch of different fronts, and I just still go back to what I had said, every time we've talked about this, which is I need them to be efficient, I need them to be effective, and I need it to make sense for us to put something in a charter that doesn't currently exist in the charter. And I haven't seen it, I don't want to tell them how to do their jobs, but there's, you have to take the initiation to do certain things. So beyond making some recommendations, I can't get there at this point.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, there are actually 2 ACL suits pending, one in state court, one in federal district court.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. I to the point of how many suits or complaints or whatever, I think we've talked about that a number of times, but we've never talked about it alongside the concept of over what period of time, right? I'm not sure, but I imagine over the 50 years, 100 years that the Bennington Police Department has been around, there's been more than 2 or 3 complaints, right? So I do think that there's a question of over what period of time are we talking about when we say that.
So that was
one more before we get there. In terms of the composition of CPARB, not really relevant to the charter, but I'm not aware of a person of color that has applied to that board. I don't know everything, but I don't know a person of color that has come and said, I applied to this board, why am I not on it? So I think there's challenges there too.
Mm-hmm. That's fair, though I would counter a lot of training is a barrier, and from what I know about the board, I would never want to join. I care about these issues, and I am not joining that board in 100 years.
And I think
Like-
another interesting point along those lines is that to be on the board, you do have to have the ability to pass certain background checks to go through those trainings, and so that would naturally limit the ability of somebody that was had been subject to police action in the past from becoming a member of that board, and so there's that implicit, challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
In regards to the time that you were talking about in our discussion with the chief, he mentioned that the data, correct me if I'm wrong, goes back to when CPARB started, and that before CPARB was put in place, that was kind of being, that's the past, we're moving forward from this date kind of thing, which,
There's a bunch of
You can
training that
agree with-
happened
you can-
at that
yeah,
point.
everybody can have their own opinion
Okay.
of that. I would definitely like to see, a 10-year kind of, here's a list. But, I mean, there's some validity to, if a system or a process was changed, that data is certainly different, but it could be noted with an asterisk.
When you say a list, are you talking about a list of complaints?
Just any sort of data that would have allowed them to provide a report, because that was what we were continuously hearing, was that there was no data available, the process in place didn't allow them to get this or that, and there was clearly, based on our discussion with the chief, there was some sort of data that was available for them to put a report together. It might not have been fully inclusive of everything that we would like to see in the report, but it could show that there was only one I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. One complaint, but then we could compare that to, well, your report shows one complaint, and we've got currently 2 lawsuits going on right now. So there's.
Well, I guess that's kind of where I was going as a basic question, is when there's a complaint filed, is it immediately reported to CPARB?
I don't know if it's reported to CPARB immediately.
That there is a complaint
No.
filed?
Definitely not.
No.
So what happens is, depending on the situation and how you define complaint is also, because someone might call in a complaint and say, officer whatever pulled me over and I wasn't speeding and he was just being a jerk. And can you drop my ticket? And he said he gets a lot of complaints that are more like that, like where they want someone to change the outcome of their interaction with the police.
What if?
And he'll look into it, and if it warrants it, and like check, footage or whatever he has to do to kind of look into the situation. Sometimes it's more just someone trying to get out of a ticket, something like that. That's not necessarily a complaint against an officer acting poorly. I'm just telling you what he said. These are his, summarizing what we
He
said.
makes that determination?
Yes.
Well, what if it's the same officer 20 times?
Well, then
I think there are flaws just everywhere.
I'm not saying this is perfect,
That
and
was
it's not my
that was to
system,
the bigger-
okay?
that was to the bigger point, which is there's just a lot of areas that we're missing, data and pieces to the whole equation.
And checks and balances.
Right, exactly.
Like,
And
if
in 2
he's-
years to not have anything for us to go off of.
Yeah.
And then considerations like, well, we need a budget. Well, I need some data to back up the need for a budget. So it's just, and again, not to they're, at least in my interaction with them, they're well intentioned to provide a better board and get things going, and they do seem to be moving in the right direction. It's just for our purposes, I see personally, not speaking for everybody, I see nothing that warrants me putting them in the charter.
Let's revisit the CPARB topic at another meeting.
Yep.
Again, there's clearly still some discussion to be had here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Miscellaneous. Overflow.
We talked
Yes.
I think there is some discussion that the miscellaneous could be a resource to other
Groups.
groups.
Yeah, that they've been not had much new material to spend their time on.
Right, but I think it helps, just based on, for instance, Rebecca's expertise in the English language, I would say, or articulating a point, that it sometimes it's not bad to be able to tap into, a committee that doesn't have a lot of activity if there's no, rogue comments, that
Yeah.
don't fall in the other ones. So
Well,
we talked about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and-
Maybe we'll get an influx of new ideas from the public at the forum. Otherwise, maybe we can look at other ways to utilize the time and resources of that sort of miscellaneous / overflow.
I heard from that Drew and Rebecca want to present the voting at the
I'm going to reiterate.
And you know what? I mean, if that's what you need to do, don't let me stop you.
Right. And it's like, if you, and I was thinking specifically around the public comments that your group may have been assigned. If you would need like assistance doing some research on that, because it may not be where you're focusing your efforts 100%, but there's this other thing that's kind of related and been put on your plate, and you're like, hey, miscellaneous group, could you help look into this for us, or could you look this up? Like, I just think that it's like picking up the odds and ends kind of group. So if there's little straggling pieces like that would assist you while you focused on, one particular charge over another, feel free to reach out.
Well, and I know coming up in a minute, we're going to look at 6 public comments for the governance group, and so like maybe that's an area where like that's just more than that group can really take on, and so maybe some of that can be spun off. Speaking of governance, as our focus
Nice segue there.
group of the day.
Well done.
She meant to do it.
So, like I said, we've got sort of 2 pieces to this here. You'll see there's a page that begins Governance Subcommittee Recommendations, ABC. So we can look at those. But then Governance Public Comments disregard that and refer to the separate 2 sheets that you have.
Can I ask a question about the first bullet point?
Do you want to ask your question once they've had a chance
I'm
to?
sorry. I'm jumping the gun here. Sorry.
Yeah. Does governance want to share what they've been looking at?
Sure.
Yeah.
We were looking at 3 main areas based on the original, what the select committee wanted us to look at. We got into the term limits for the select committee. We've gotten into the town manager and how the town manager is evaluated, and how that whole interaction is actually done with the select committee specifically, with the interviews with the chair, the interview with Cassie, the interview with Stu and Dan. I think that we've gotten a pretty good perspective of what's been happening historically, regardless of some of the negative comments. But I learned a lot during the process because I didn't know a lot about the history, historical perspective, but we spoke to people who obviously did. And just by, the different individuals on the governance committee, their backgrounds and what they're used to seeing in their world, kind of thing. So we kind of homed in on 3 areas. After that, we wanted to look at the town manager position, how to make it a little bit more structured of what we're used to in the corporate world with the town manager and with somebody in that particular, especially if not only how it exists today, but also if it ever opens up in the future, how it would be looked at. So again, we went through the term limits for the select committee. After speaking with the select committee and the other people we spoke to, we think that it's okay the way it is right now. That people will be voted out. There's an election that will decide that, and originally I thought, well, there's got to be an end, but there is. If the citizens don't want you, you're going to get voted out. So
I have a question about this. Is there other towns, I don't know, maybe Dan or Stu, you guys know this, is there other towns where select board members have term limits? And is that something that is common around the state or not so common?
I don't think it's very common at all.
Yeah.
I didn't think
I
so
don't know of
either.
any, but-
I was going to call the League of City and Towns this week, and I just had a real busy week, so I'll probably do that on Monday to check that back, because I figured if anyone know, they might know.
They would know, but
Yeah. I think it's pretty
I'm not aware
uncommon.
of any other town.
Yeah,
that
I
has
couldn't
term.
think, I was trying to find one, I couldn't find one the other day.
I think a couple of towns have tried to put that in their charter, and it's been consistently rejected by
Rejected.
the legislature.
I'm going to say at the state level, it gets shut down every
well,
time.
that was the other
Yeah.
piece. You actually brought up a good point, is that nobody would think this would, even if we wanted to,
Mhm.
that would be shot down
Mhm.
by the legislature anyway. Because
Yeah.
not a lot of,
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if what was put to the legislature was for a select board specifically, or if it was for other elected positions, but my understanding is that their stance on all elected positions is that the election is your term limit.
and then we got into the, whether the chair or vice chair should have, and you're taking away what the select board can do as a select board, which is really, they nominate their chair
Mhm.
and vice chair. Why do you want to start micromanaging some, it didn't seem like it was worth pursuing at the time after hearing how the select board operates, or did operate up until March. But the way that they operate as a board.
Can I ask you a question on that? What is the longest, maybe Stu, you know this answer, what is the longest that a chair or vice chair of the select board has sat in that position?
I think it's probably nearly a decade.
What is the current one at? I don't even know who the,
Jeannie Jenkins
Jeannie
is the current
Jenkins.
chair, and she's been chair for, this will be her second term, so for 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
And the way it was described, Michael, is that the first 3 years you're learning. You really don't know
Actually, I
all the.
misspoke. I think Jeannie's only been chair for 3 years.
And this is her
Prior
second.
to her was Donald Campbell,
Yeah.
Right.
and then Tom Jacobs. So they
Okay.
tend to rotate out, and it looks many times that the longest serving member who desires to be chair, because many people don't desire to be chair, would end up serving for their final term.
Gotcha.
Can I ask another question? When you're made chair, no, are you chair for a year, for your whole term, for how
1 year.
long does that last?
1 year.
Do they,
It's a 1-year term.
and then every year they decide who the chair is again for the next year? Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
to get
When the
a
board
majority.
reforms after the election, they reorganize.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
Are the select board members allowed to, market's not the word, campaign for other select board members?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They are.
very
That's
much
interesting.
so.
Mhm.
They do.
But it's a nonpartisan position.
Well, it's supposed to not be, yes.
Yeah.
You don't
Like all
have
things.
designation after your name on
Right.
the ballot. Right.
So you could have people out there campaigning. Can they say as the, endorsed by the chair of the select board?
They can.
Sure.
Even the charter committee.
Have you been getting those emails too? That seems like kind of a conflict of interest to me. That
I just want to point out again, that, as just mentioned, that it's really hard to get select board members to run in this town. So
yeah, no, I get that, but it just seems like when we're talking about term limits, right? If you're able to somehow manage to get 6 of your buddies on the select board, then your term limit seems to increase exponentially. Not that I'm not accusing. I'm just saying. I'm just looking at the process from a process standpoint.
Like from the perspective that the endorsement of another select board member would carry that much weight with the voter?
Yeah, I mean potentially. Just if you have the majority of the select board out there promoting a particular candidate for the select board, I guess maybe the way I'm approaching it would be that I would rather not have the 7 people on the select board be able to say or provide a public endorsement for people running for the select board, because then it keeps them out of that. I'm sure they can, behind the scenes tell their friends and stuff.
Yeah, I think historically, Mike, it's more behind the scenes than outright endorsements or
if there was more competition and it was more engagement, instead of people having to find people to serve on the select board, I would agree with you somewhat, but it's not that way at all.
I also think you probably would have a serious constitutional issue trying to tell people they can't endorse a candidate when they're an elected official themselves. I mean, that's fundamental politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I get why you wouldn't want it to happen, but
Yeah. Well,
That's political speech.
When I worked for the government, I couldn't.
Yeah, well, it's like
It's not.
if you have the military, for example, they're not supposed to be taking pictures in uniform with political candidates. You would think that a police chief, the police and the fire departments generally get used in politics quite a bit, but you would think that you would want the police chief and the fire chief to be removed from those kind of pictures, because the whole purpose of that is to drive the supporters of the police and the fire to that particular candidate. I'm getting off on a tangent here, so I apologize.
There's a difference between
it's
an employee and an elected official. I think that's the fundamental.
Good
Like,
point.
for instance, Stuart can't participate in any political.
but the manager's position here is apolitical according to the charter.
Charter restricts his ability to
So you
publicly.
Judges in the state of Vermont are mandated to be apolitical. They can't participate in.
So they can't make an endorsement. You can't make an endorsement.
So I guess my question, so there is precedent for that within the town as it is with
For
you.
employees.
for employees.
But because the select board are not employees,
They're
No,
elected.
they're elected.
officials.
Yeah, they're elected official.
They are technically employees, but they're elected officials.
that's why I was asking, is because they do receive pay.
Yeah,
Very little.
but they're elected though.
Okay.
Yeah. And indeed, we elect them often because of their views on things, right? So,
Sorry, I was trying to go perfect world there for a second.
Politics is a messy business.
I hate to burst your bubble. It's not like that, but okay. Anyway, so after we looked at the term limits and we kind of took that off the table. We looked at the nationwide search, if the town manager position, and there was some discussion on that, and there's some strong opinions on the individuals that we interviewed. But really, that's something that, again, I don't want to dilute what the select board can do. That should really be their decision. There was a lot of discussion that whether it should be nationwide doesn't work. It hasn't in other areas in Vermont when they reeled in somebody from another state. Also, there was some talk about restricting it to the state of Vermont. People would be more familiar with but again, at the end of the day, it should be the select board's choice what they want to do.
Or public comment as a private citizen, whenever that time does come up. I am more than welcome to go up to public comment and say, hey, I want to see a nationwide, or whatever my position might be,
And as far as we are aware, they do plan on conducting a search, you know, and they have the resources and the outlet to do that if it's necessary. But I'm not sure either if that's really something that needs to be ingrained into a charter,
Yeah.
and telling them how to do their job on that micromanagement level.
I guess I had like that same question about the employment agreement, the 5-year contract. Does the select board already have the ability to offer a 5-year contract, and they've just chosen not to do that, or would it have to be in the charter for them to offer
The
that?
charter currently provides that the manager serves the select board and may be removed of 90 days' notice.
Yeah.
So
there's
will
no-
that stay, was my question
Yeah.
regarding the 5-year
That's
employment
considered.
contract.
No,
Does that
we-
remove that, or
Yes.
it
That
does
would
remove
remove
that?
that.
So,
It gives
I
them a
mean,
contract.
You'd have to have some type of.
so what happens if you get a dud in there and, you know?
There's a removal process probably in the
Yeah.
In
for
the contract.
cause in the contract, but they can't just come in and say you're done without
Yeah.
cause, which is
It's
what
gotta-
could happen
it's
right now
gotta
if
be
they
something.
wanted to.
You know, you're not going to be able to, in my world, however distorted that might be, this is a good recruitment tool. It goes both ways, and then you're negotiating
Yeah.
the 5-year agreement, which includes compensation and includes other things that you might, you know, depending on how legal looks at it, if there's a boilerplate or there's a modified, it provides protection for the person who's maybe moving, or
So
maybe,
that was another question I had. So for a lot of other elected positions, you have to live in a certain area for a certain amount of time before you can qualify to run for that office.
Mhm.
Is that a consideration that would also be, has that been considered for the town manager position? And I only ask this because moving from a big city to a small town, I cannot fathom somebody understanding the nuances of a small town in this particular community without having lived here for at least several years.
It's
I
not
just-
an
I-
elected position though.
Well,
Yeah.
I understand that, but we're talking about a 5-year contract now
yeah.
versus an at-will.
There's no residency requirement in the position itself. Select board members tend to ask that you live here if you didn't live here when you applied. They'd want you to move here.
And,
There's
and,
no
but-
requirement at the present time.
and,
You
and the flip,
potentially
and the
even
flip
could
side
be
to
the
that
town
is
manager
that
and
that may
not live here at
work
the
to your
same time.
advantage.
You could be.
Somebody who hasn't been.
The new Secretary of Education is from Florida and only worked for private schools. So,
I'm sure that's going well.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I'm not trying to say that you can't
No, I
come
agree
here,
with you,
'cause, like,
but it's also like, yeah.
you know, I'm also new to the area, so like, I don't want us to be stuck in a position where we're stuck with a potato for 5 years,
Right.
and it's
If
either
I'm sorry.
it's either like we're gonna pay this guy a balloon, you know, an umbrella payment, or women for an umbrella payment because, you know, 1 year in there was cause, and then we're on the hook for whatever the contractual obligation is.
I'm not stuck to 5 years. Even if it was 3 years. It provides comfort from both ends.
Well, I don't care. I'm
As a recruit.
just asking. It doesn't remove the 90. You're saying it does remove the 90-day process.
Well,
Is there a world where we could keep that 90-day process for cause?
Well, any employment contract will have a for-cause
Yes.
clause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you
Okay.
screw up and they can prove that you screwed up.
Perfect.
yeah.
And
It's not even 90 days.
That answers my
in
question.
but in the
Right.
world of employment law, I just know from some past experiences, like often proving that you have cause
Yeah.
is like a really insurmountable sort of bar to meet, right?
Can be
That like somebody might actually be mismanaging, but if you can't prove it, then you can't remove them.
It was also
It's
explained to
indirect
us on the
thing.
search process that what will more than likely will happen, the Vermont League of City and Towns
Yes.
will do a preliminary search and will come up with a list of viable candidates. And so that kind of takes in your question, are they going to be familiar with, a potential candidate for town manager going to be cognizant of the nuances of small Vermont town as opposed to Detroit, you know. And so that's one of the things, that's actually one of the first layers of a job search, of recruitment. And so that's what, taking that in mind, we didn't want to say, well, you have to do a national search. If we're already going to go, put it into the charter that you need to do a national, regional, whatever kind of search. If the select board is already going to be reaching out to the Vermont League of City and Towns for a list of qualified candidates. The only reason we're suggesting putting a contract into the charter language is because right now it is charter language that the town manager could be terminated, you know, for cause at will. And I agree with Drew and Colleen that I think it makes it much easier to recruit a qualified candidate when this does come about. If somebody comes in knowing, I have clear legal language of what I'm looking at, this is the contract, this is what I need to do, this is my end, this is the town's end.
I have a suggestion too. I meant to do, I said call League of City and Towns. I'm going to call them on Monday and I'll see if we can get a sample contract, because that's where it would come from anyway, and then maybe take a little deeper look into that language surrounding it in the next coming weeks.
I'm not opposed to it. My personal preference is perform or get the hell out. You know, and obviously in the current state, based on the public comments, I mean, performing for 50 years.
Yeah, but you know, it also, if I'm walking into a position like that, or I'm moving, or I'm relocating, or it takes away that every year you're going to hear that badgering of what we had out, you know, we don't like what you're doing kind of thing, but knowing that there's an extended, I mean, it would have to be something egregious, you know, and plus you're open to the same laws that you were anywhere else. I mean, you know, you're picking on me, you know, I'm old, you know,
I get both arguments.
It's all that, you know.
I get the comfort argument, and then, you know, I also come from the, you know.
But the select board has a pretty rigorous way that they review, and they set goals, and they evaluate. So I'm not so worried about that. I didn't know that before we interviewed, but after hearing what goes on in the evaluation process, the expectations are pretty well known.
Can you walk us through that? Because I didn't know that until you just said that.
Well,
like as a general, like you don't have to.
No. I can give you the 2 minute, which is longer than the 5 minute. I'm getting wet. Basically, the expectations, there's goals that are set for the town manager, and Stu, you can correct me if I'm. And what happens is when they're evaluated, and it doesn't seem like it's a once a year kind of thing. It's like they're looking at it throughout the year. But they also talk to people that report to Stu, work with Stu.
It's like 10 or something.
Yeah,
7
I mean, it's
or
not
13,
one person, and it's not the same
Seven from
person.
inside the town employee and 7 from outside. the
Yep,
town
it's
employee.
40.
So
Usually asking the same questions of all of those interviewees.
yeah,
And they're anonymously done for the most part. And they're pretty, I mean, that's 14 interviews a year. That's a pretty lot to double check on someone, you know?
And the results are published.
And then they publish results in the paper every single year.
I don't know if I agree with that, but it's again, you're micromanaging the select board. But I think that it's thorough enough, and it's actually probably makes it last a little longer than you would want to do the evaluation. But at the end of the day, you get a very fair and concise evaluation, and Stu knows his goals in advance, and he knows, you know, throughout the year whether they're.
So what happens if you don't hit your goals currently?
Well, from what I understand, Stu usually hits his goals. But
Well, there's obviously extenuating circumstances.
But other goals could take the place. I mean, things are fluid.
And it seems like it's
So,
like from both
yeah,
parties, it's
yeah.
a conversation more than like, you know, like you have to hit your goals, but it's also a conversation like as a town, how are we achieving these goals and how are we working together and what needs
Or maybe
to work?
there had to be a different
I need
course.
some more support in this area. Like it's
Yeah.
conversational too. It's not just like,
Annually, I provide a self-evaluation And that gets submitted to the board prior to their evaluation process. So they're looking at what I thought I did and accomplished, and then they're comparing it to what they had hoped that I would accomplish. And then it really is a discussion in the end. In the executive session, we talk through all of our sometimes differences and most times agreements.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I just had a question back to the contract itself, the multi-year contract. This would be open for renewal, right? So at the end of a contract, they could renew that contract or choose
Correct.
not to renew that contract too, right?
Correct.
And there would be no end to the renewal, right? So if somebody could stay in the office for a long period of time because they just keep renewing their contract, right?
It's no, it's no different,
Almost
yeah.
like in part of this.
Thank you.
But it also gives them some negotiating power too.
Yeah.
So it's on both sides.
I think part of what I'm stuck on here too is like I think I might support this more if there was some history of the select board like churning through town managers, but that's clearly not been the case, right? They've been we've had the same town manager for a couple decades now.
3 decades.
So 3 decades. You know, so either the town manager is just excellent at his job, which I'm sure is true, right? But it doesn't seem like the select board is like trying to nitpick the town manager. I get where this would be give someone give a potential candidate, right, more confidence that they would have some longevity in this role. I might be more in support of language that allowed the select board to offer a contract of 1 year, 2 years, 3, like maybe that's like
Part of their
up to their
deliberation.
choice or whatever, right? Like what they offer, as opposed to like necessarily stipulating that it's a 5-year contract or a 3-year contract, right? They might.
I would, yes, I would agree with you, except that people change on the select board.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same select board during that 5-year agreement
Mm-hmm.
that this is their hire. So people can come in with their own preconceived what a town manager is supposed to be and may not feel the same.
That's a great point, that a new select board elected by the voters might have a different opinion on who should be town manager. That's why we elect the select board. So if the select board's opinion changes, they presumably should have the latitude to make that kind of change in town employees.
I see both sides to it.
I
Yeah.
have not, being in the nonprofit governmental board world,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that. I think that if you have new board members that come on that just clearly don't like the person, and it's usually a voluntary board,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the right thing to do either. That's not necessarily good for the organization, you know, for the...
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I think for myself, that's a key difference in how nonprofits should function versus how public offices should function.
Well, it's even true in the corporate world, or public office.
And I think in the nonprofit world and in the corporate world, there is a lot more focus on maintaining some of that stability. But I think part of what's special about our municipal process, about elections and voting, is that it does allow the citizens a voice to say, we want something to change here.
I personally, in terms of the municipality component, am all for the people having the power as much as possible. Now, in terms of a recruitment tool, does a longevity contract make sense? Yes. Does it help potentially recruit people? Yes. Does it make the person serving office more comfortable? Yes. Not that I don't want them to be comfortable, but I also, you know, maybe my concern about a dud is unwarranted, but I'm just, you know, picturing a scenario where the person gets put in there who has the opposite of the values or whatever through what, you know, maybe the process has a flaw, I don't know, and then we're stuck with them for 5 years, and then
Well, I will say the Brattleboro situation, they
Which
did
I'm-
pay out that
Yeah.
town manager on
and,
their
that,
contract.
and that's what I'm using as the example
Yeah.
that you guys presented was Brattleboro was the prime example
Right.
where the town paid it out, and it's just like, how do we avoid? Maybe there is no way to avoid it. I don't know.
Well, this isn't like tenure. You're talking about a 3 to 5 year agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of damage can be done in 1 year, let alone three
Well,
to five.
then they would be removed for cause.
And as
Yeah.
long as that's the stipulation in there, then I'm good. I do think, that, as Jackie pointed out, I think there's, you know, potential legal holdups to that as well. But
I mean, there's things that could be put in the contract too, that if you're, if you're terminated for cause, you get half of
when,
what the
to your
remainder of the
point,
agreement.
when you said is it something that they could offer, I think did you say that, or maybe that was Jackie? What does that come with, like after their first year or upon review of the first year, they can extend a 3-year contract based on performance, or like, or is it just a general rethinking?
I was mostly thinking anything that allows the select board more latitude in how they hire a town manager would be more amenable to me than stipulating you have to offer a 5-year contract.
Then saying something like, you just have to have a contract with the town manager, and then it's on their discretion. Kind of how we've left some of the other things more to their discretion, like how their search is going to be conducted or things like that. Maybe it is their discretion. There has to be a contract in place. It's not just like a 60-day get out or 90-day get out. But maybe we don't have to say 5-year, you know?
Well, what's the skin in the game for somebody to come, in this national search to come and be here? What is their skin? If we give them 5 years, 6-figure amount, whatever it is, I don't even know what the town manager makes, and then they know that they have a protection generally from legal protection unless they just completely are negligent. What is their skin in the game to the people of the town? Because we're obviously putting our skin in the game.
Well, if they're not from here, they're relocating their families here.
Yeah, but what is the skin in the, like, what are they offering us that we feel comfortable?
Well, they're making a commitment of time. I mean, you don't want somebody coming here and then leaving.
We
9 months
might.
later. Well,
We might. That's my point.
I understand. Well, I don't know how you're going to get all the protection that you're throwing out. I mean, you go first year, you're on double secret probation.
I love that.
I mean, then we offer you a new agreement. I'm not opposed to a 1-year renewable
Right.
every year, as long as there's an agreement that the person knows they have an agreement and they have some level of comfort walking into a new position.
It's a 1 year right now, correct? Or
That's at
what
will.
No,
is
it's
it?
not. That's at will.
90 days,
It's at will.
90 days notice.
So what am I able to ask? Am I able to ask you questions about this?
Sure.
Here? I'm sorry. How has it been for you?
Well, it's been okay for me. You have to remember, though, I've worked for this community since 1973.
Correct.
So I had a relationship with the community as well as the various select boards that had developed over the years. And so when they offered me this position, I don't think there was any anticipation that it would last a long time or not. It was just, I had a good relationship with the people I was working with. I've always had good relations with various boards. And every position I've held here has had a board. I did what Dan does when I first came, and then I just moved up the ladder. And so I really didn't think much about it.
Would the contractual change here have been more enticing to you? Does it change your view?
What drove me to ask for the position as an assistant manager was the prior manager that I worked with was not a good human being.
Okay.
And I was bound and determined not to work for another one.
Okay. Well, so with that in mind, that person, don't know who they are, not important, they got a 5-year deal. Now there's nothing you can do about it.
That's true. That's true. And in fact, the prior manager was the longest serving manager we've had here since 1969 when the town and village consolidated. Now he served 6 years. And ultimately he lost the support of the board through some of his actions. And the board changed, which is what you're talking about.
Right.
Members changed. Others came in not necessarily enamored with his particular management style. And fortunately, I've had board members who are enamored with my management style.
Stu, do you have relationships with other town managers from Vermont, outside of Vermont? Is this a common thing elsewhere?
Vermont has a Vermont Town and City Managers Association. It's a subset of the league. We gather twice annually just to review things. There's always something on the agenda, but it's also a time of collegiality, getting to know one another. And that longevity in the state of Vermont is not necessarily rare. Brattleboro had a town manager who served for 30 years, a long time ago. Woodstock had a town manager who served 31 years. Killington, I think he was 28 years. Town manager in Montpelier is currently 27 years in his position. Gentleman just retired in the town and village of Wallingford. He did something like 27 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not unusual in Vermont. It may be unusual elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And we find in Vermont that many of the managers move from town to town.
Okay.
A manager may work in Bethel, Vermont, which is a very, very small town, mm-hmm. And then there's an opening somewhere else. They may apply for that, or they may be on the move anyway. Mm-hmm. And so you go from a manager in the town of Killington to now the manager of the town of Middlebury to the manager. And so people stay quite some time. We've seen change recently because we're aging out, mm-hmm. those of us who've been managers for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. I'm the rarity in that regard, but
how often are town managers dismissed without cause in Vermont? Can you give a perspective on that?
Rarely. Vermont, even though our charter is an at-will charter, Vermont labor law says that municipal employees can only be relieved for cause.
Okay.
So there's a contradiction in the labor law and our charter to some degree. If the board rapidly changed over in the next election, mm-hmm. and now you had 5 people want me out,
yeah.
Technically under the charter they could attempt to dismiss me with 90 days notice. Could I bring a lawsuit? Yes. Would I bring a lawsuit? I don't know.
Most likely. Situation.
Yeah. Most likely, because I'm not ready to go yet. But
sure.
It is rare in Vermont to have things like happened in Brattleboro, mm-hmm. where that individual just was so, he had come from New Jersey and he was so out of touch with what Vermont is like that he began some processes over there that have turned that town in a way upside down with regard to emergency services.
Yeah.
Okay.
And ultimately, I think he just realized that I can't do this. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised that Brattleboro paid him out.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was going to resign anyway.
But did they When we say paid him out, does that mean that there was a
I
contract
believe they
that?
paid him 2 years' salary and benefits.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
It wasn't a contract though.
Oh,
that
he had a
they-
contract.
I think
He
he was
did have a
under contract.
Okay.
It may not, it may have been a negotiated settlement.
Probably.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I have a suggestion. So I think the reason that I think it's important to talk about this issue is because of the let's say the contradiction between labor law and the charter. So I think it's important that we sync those up if we can. And it's going to remain. If we make no change, it's still going to stay the same. But I think by explicitly saying that the select board may enter into a contract, whether it's 1 year to 5 years, 2 years, 6 months, what that will do is it'll put down clear definitions of what is cause, what the expectations are. I think by not having a contract, especially with someone new, I mean, Stuart had been here for 20 years already, that you kind of leave yourself open to miscommunication between expectations. And I just think it would make sense to define what cause is in a contract as opposed to letting, it be
arbitrary.
let it just be defined by, what the current status of the.
So does that come from us as a recommendation, or is that something that we include in the charter?
It would have to be a charter change.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would have to be in the
our
charter change.
recommendation.
Yeah.
A recommendation to
for-
the select board.
No.
For
For-
a charter change.
Yeah.
A recommendation from us to change the
It can-
charter.
Yeah, it could just be basically you're empowering or making it clear, because I think there's still an argument that they could do a contract now, but making it clear that the expectation is that there be clear written documentation of what each party expects out of the relationship. And it can be, maybe we don't have to say a specific time, but it's maybe we even limit it, say up to a 5-year agreement or
Right.
something.
Absolutely.
But that way it's clear to the select board, it's clear to the public, it's clear to the incoming manager. This is how we do things here. We're going to negotiate an agreement with you that's acceptable to all parties. And
I'm all for the clarity.
And as for the argument
That's
that we're taking,
compelling.
it would take power away from the select board, it would be the current select board that's looking at this contract that would have to approve it or not. So select board still has ultimate authority to, okay, we're going to offer this contract to this person at that time.
Well, and I guess it does sound to me then that a contract, say a 3-year contract, would allow the town sort of to more easily find a new town manager at the end of that contract, even if there were not cause to remove the person that had that 3-year contract.
Yeah?
yeah, it's a very good point. So if the 3 years are up, end of contract. Sorry, time to go. You don't have to fight about whether there was cause or not.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does protect both parties in the long run.
They can just choose not to renew them.
Yeah,
Right.
choose not to renew. You
Yeah.
don't have to have cause not to renew a contract.
Right.
But in the current situation, you have to have cause
Well,
regardless, unless they
so it's just
decide to have
at
a
will
contract.
for both parties.
Kind of, basically, because if you listen to what Dan said about labor law, actually, municipal employees cannot be fired for anything but cause. They can't just.
Well, but so how does it work? Like, what is the term right now? Just
None.
There's
it's just-
none.
okay.
He just keeps
And that's
working.
what Dan's right.
So,
It's what the
okay.
contract gives you. It gives you the
Gotcha.
opportunity to say at the end of a 2 or a 3-year
Right.
period,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, that thank you very much. It's much like teacher contracts.
Yeah.
They have to be. You have to renew in March if
Right.
if the board's going to
Sure.
renew. If you don't, then the teacher is out.
So if they didn't renew in March, there's no legal issue.
Right.
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 You don't
Okay.
have to renew a contract,
No.
It's a contract.
but you do have to follow the terms of the contract while it's in place.
But right now, if they weren't to renew in March, is there a legal issue? Because there is no contract.
There is no contract. They
There's
have
nothing
to.
to
They
it.
can't get rid of me unless they fire me
Gotcha.
or I
Gotcha.
Or find out you're from New Jersey.
It's almost as bad as from Connecticut.
It's like a cousin.
Yeah.
So Well, this was really helpful for me to
Yeah,
wrap my
thank
head
you.
around.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
that
appreciate
was
that.
very good.
I know you had it in here.
I can go whatever the majority is. I just, all I'm trying to do is get, is worry about recruitment and retention and expectations.
Yeah, clarity of the
Without taking
relationship.
away the
Yeah.
power
Yeah.
of the select.
Sure.
Right.
And actually, 5 years, actually, when you think about it now, 3 years sounds like a good term to me. That's what we're electing select board members for, excuse me.
Is that the term for select board
Yeah,
members?
it is.
3, so we can
Yeah.
make that parallel with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming in as a new town manager, I've got a vision, I've sold it to the select board. They've said, okay, we're hiring me. I've got 3 years to show that I can move forward on this contract, on this vision. And at the end of 3 years, the select board can say, yeah, not so much. And say, we're looking for somebody else. Or they can say, hey, you got another 3 years, let's see what you do.
Do you offset it by a year so that they're not running?
They're always new.
Yeah,
There's always new people on the
Every year
select
is
board.
Every, yeah.
Okay.
I know we took the clock down. I just want to stay mindful of the time. It's
Yeah.
4:45. So I think.
Likewise when you're having fun.
Governance does it every time.
So I think there's certainly much more to discuss here. We
Yeah.
haven't talked about any of the public comments.
No.
Let's get
And we do
Yep.
have the public forum to talk to because that's next Wednesday.
Yep.
Maybe governance is again on the slate for next week. Agreed?
I'll be here next week, that's fine.
Okay, great.
It's cool.
Okay, let's look at the PowerPoint presentation that Rebecca's put together for the public forum. Thank you, Rebecca.
We're shrinking.
Yeah, well, no one else is allowed to leave.
Oh, shoot, that's
We can get rid of one more, right?
One more. One more.
We're all like fighting this one.
So we've already looked at this before. I don't
Yeah.
imagine that there's
Yeah, just
a
make
lot
sure of the
to do
changes.
here.
Yeah, the changes that you asked to have, just make sure that they were done. I would just ask everybody to review those, please.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at the first couple pages, the introduction changed a little bit. I added some of these notes that you all brought up from the last meeting that I'll read the full charge. Talk about the purpose of the public forum. The background page is unchanged. The unique uncommon charter provisions is unchanged. I think charter amendment process is unchanged. Voting eligibility, do we have changes here?
No, I looked it over.
No. Properties, looks like something is shifted here.
Those
Who
are-
you've met with, that got added, right?
Yeah, we never, we still, let's see, Yeah, we're okay. We didn't have Dan as one of the people we had met with.
It's okay.
Okay.
He's unimportant.
But kind of more.
I'm here every time.
I also added this acknowledgement of differences. This was a bullet point that Carolyn gave
Yeah.
me, so just make sure that
That's
was
fine.
right.
Mhm.
Okay.
All good.
The font is also the same color, so I appreciate that.
I did that first thing.
Boom.
Page 2 of properties, is that the same?
See?
Yep.
C-part page.
Town governance, before we get to CPOD, town governance, the second page of town governance, areas being considered a formal 5-year agreement for the town manager. Given the conversation we just had, do we want to change that language?
To a formal agreement.
Yeah.
And
Take
just,
out 5-year.
Yeah.
yeah, just take out 5-year and make it formal, and then
Formal and not from New Jersey.
There you go.
I'm kidding. I'm from New Jersey. That's why I'm saying that. It's like,
I live there as well.
okay.
Do we want to say employment agreement or employment contract, just to make, do we understand, maybe it's clear.
Employment contract.
A
Yeah.
formal
would be better.
employment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A formal, yeah.
Okay.
Text under information gathering to date is copper color.
Wait, where are we?
Community on the C part.
What is?
The font changes color again.
Where?
Under information gathering to date.
Boy, you have eagle eyes.
I do.
Boy, that is hard
I'm
to
just
see.
I'm just telling you. I know she's just messing with me.
And
She's
what
trying
color
to
did
see
you,
if I
you
can
said?
catch
You said it was
it.
copper?
It's like copper color, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it like
It
a
does
12?
match the rest of the,
There's a copperish
this
color
whole,
to it.
it does match the whole thing. So it was all that color, and I went back, I was trying to make it all
See, I
that.
took- what did I just tell you?
You're right.
She's trying to see
Is
if
there
I
like a
catch it.
12-step program or something on this? Or what?
I know what it's like to be colorblind. It's so hard to see that.
Must be the lighting.
Any changes to the CPORB slides? Miscellaneous. There was one thing here that came up. Jim, help me out. I'm not remembering.
The 3 categories, this middle one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Rebecca actually addressed it, that that the miscellaneous subcommittee can help with any other issues that subcommittees might run into now that we're narrowing down.
Yeah, the 3 categories and then the categories you have listed, like those are not like all that's under the purview of miscellaneous.
Okay.
So,
Like
Oh,
what-
that's not what that was supposed to be.
Okay.
So, how I was going to present it was that the public comments that we received have fallen into 3 categories.
Mm.
Oh,
So the 3 categories were specific to the public comments. If you read the first bullet under overview now, it has to review other areas as deemed appropriate by the committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if I could change 3 categories to be more specific. I was just going to bring up that to date, the public comments that we have received have basically fallen into 3 categories. They either just are
Got
in
it.
support of something, or they go to one of our groups for more, in-depth looking, or they fall out of those, and this group is like looking at those.
Got it.
That's what I was
I understand what you're saying.
saying.
Got it.
That's good.
The questions and comments slide, I went back and forth on this, so maybe I didn't leave this in the updates that I sent you. But I thought I had put like some notes below here in terms of like keep your comments to 3 minutes and
Yeah, but
like I said, I
was
went back
actually-
and forth, so maybe I took them off again. I put them in at one point, but
Okay.
We should definitely make that clear though.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good idea. I'll go back and double check the email, but I was looking for them, so that's why I feel like I didn't see them.
Okay. I'll double check what I sent you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can double check what I can do it right now. Right now. Either way, let's do it for sure.
Okay.
I'll definitely.
Great.
I'll disperse all of these.
The last slide looks great.
There you go.
Oh, and then there's a whole new last slide, which everybody should just double check that QR code works, because I had to copy and paste it from an image file, and I just
Guess I gotta check.
make sure that it's.
Yeah, it looks like it's
Is it working?
doing what it's
Okay.
supposed to. Yeah, great. Any concerns about the slides?
Pretty good.
Good.
Okay, great.
I love that chocolate coffee.
Then we will make
Thank you. Yeah.
we will make those 2 or 3 small changes, and I'll get this off to Jonah probably over the weekend. One other thing that had come up for me regarding the PowerPoint presentation is that Colleen let me know that she was not going to be able to attend the public forum. I believe she was presenting governance. Yes?
but yeah, we already spoke. I'll present that.
You'll present that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Properties,
Properties.
miscellaneous, governance.
You're taking on governance and voting at the same time.
I didn't say anything about that.
Mike, I'll trade with you if you go wrong. Great. Any other notes about our public forum? There was something.
The one other thing that came up in our administrative meeting was just when we're transitioning from one presenter to the next, we had talked about the idea of having either the current presenter pass the buck, not the buck, that's the wrong thing to say. Pass the baton. That's
There you go. Yeah.
I was oddly looking at you, Mike. No,
You have a baton? No.
to pass the baton to the next speaker, or whether like we would just have like one host that like introduce the next speaker. And we were talking about if we do it so the current speaker is passing it to the next speaker, make sure you know as the speaker who's presenting after you, so that you're able to do that.
Do you want us to do it in like track and field formation where we start with the baton back and then the other person
Run around.
You have to get a running short, yeah.
You might be able to deal with that via the seating arrangement. And that is, if you
Okay.
So they pay you to
move
take
around
that.
the table.
Yeah, let's
Because
do
each
that.
of you will have a microphone.
Yes. down the line.
We have name tags for you, so you all have your name tags in front of you. So as you move, depending on the
Setup.
way you're going to present, you just
Oh.
take those, that's how you sit. So that you start and you move down the table and then you come back the other way, or however, you could do it that way so that
Sure.
you're just turning to the person next to you when you're done.
And the order is what's here in the.
So Jackie, you're doing the C part?
Well, that's part of the challenge is I'll speak at the beginning and
Right.
then also on the CPARB.
Is that the last one?
No.
No, Muslin.
And did you put these in order?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I reordered them so that they match the charges in the order of the charges.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
So, okay, all right.
So I'll wind up speaking first and then, what, fifth of six.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're the chair, you're gonna introduce the situation anyway.
Yeah.
And your name tag says chair on it.
Jackie, did you tell Stuart how you wanted to set up the room, or we have that clear yet?
I understood it was gonna be, the screen is on the wall, the tables will be
Each side?
sort of diagonal,
Yeah.
4 on one table, 3 on the other, since there are 7 of you.
Well, 2 will not be there.
Oh, that's,
Oh, two.
Yeah, Carolyn won't be there.
Oh, right.
We only have 5 of us. That's why I was surprised.
So
that she
I go to
wasn't
the
there.
kids' table, is that it?
So it would be 3 and 2.
so it'd be 3 and 2. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeesh.
Okay. And then the audience will be back here. We'll set them this way so they'll be able to look at you when you're doing the PowerPoint. You're probably going to have to turn slightly in your chair to talk to the PowerPoint. But unless you do it like the select board do it, where they all sit at one side of the room and everybody looks that way. That if you want to be in that diagonal. with
Can
the
you
screen.
stand and present?
That would be up to you. If you wanted to leave your chair and move to the podium,
Where's the podium going to be?
So the podium's not in between the seating arrangement
No,
with the screen behind?
see
No,
that would be
well,
difficult
yeah.
because then you'd have that light in your face.
Gotcha.
We could set the podium up so that it's here, you leave your seat, you go to the podium to make your presentation, and then you come back to your
I'd
chair.
feel more comfortable standing up.
Yeah, I would,
Not that
yeah.
it's a big deal, but
Just my cautionary tale with that is I can't count the number of people that come up to present at the podium, look to the PowerPoint, and you no longer
Hear them.
hear them.
Right.
Yeah, because they're very crappy mics and very directional. You know,
Yeah, they are extremely directional.
yeah.
Plus, please, maybe it's a pet peeve of mine, but don't present to the podium. You've got the slides.
Yeah.
Right? You can talk to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, don't look at PowerPoint, just talk to the audience.
How are we going to set up? So we should just think about having the podium, where the podium's going to be for the public too. So we may have a presenter podium and a public.
Well, if I
Well,
can't,
we'll have
If I can't look at the slides, how do I-
Questioner microphone.
Yeah.
Just have that standard
Okay.
mic.
So you got off.
Sit in the middle.
Yeah, I just want to be figuring it out that night.
well, if I
Yeah.
can't look at the
Yeah,
slides, how do I
so-
know when to change it?
So we'll have what? We'll have the screen.
Don't look to me.
No, okay.
I mean, we could probably.
Tables.
I don't know whether Jonah's gonna be there or not.
Podium. Jonah's going to be there.
Yes.
He said he would be there at
So
5:30.
Jonah will change
Is
the
that the
slides.
podium for the
And so all you
people?
need to say is,
Yeah,
you know,
and then seating.
Next slide.
yeah.
Okay.
And you'll have your,
And then we'll have a
You'll know
microphone
what's up there.
that we pass around amongst the tables?
Each
No,
table
each-
is going to have a
You will
set
each have a mic.
microphone.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see anything wrong with that. Make it easy.
Do you see my scratch?
Yeah, that was great. That was a great visual for me.
this is the public podium.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll
Okay.
sit at the
Yep.
tables, and this is the screen.
I like it.
Okay.
Let me see. See, if that matches my scratch. Now, this podium is the public's podium?
Yeah.
There is no public's podium.
Well, but
Public microphone.
a public microphone.
Yeah.
Right,
Microphone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you want, I mean, if people are gonna get up to present, would you want the podium here for the presenters?
Where's everybody going to stay seated?
You know,
I'll stay seated.
Yeah.
okay, no,
Just
no
disregard
podium for the
mine.
presenters. So we could
I'm
put
with
a
you though, I
podium.
like kind of stand up.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
prefer to
yeah.
stand up.
But
Could
it's
use the podium
be
there
fairly quick.
with
Yeah.
that mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I
see.
mean,
Well, your
these folks, I don't know
I'll vote
where
it
you're gonna
again.
be. Where's
Yeah, where's the
Becky
camera?
That's it.
Well, that's my setup. I'll probably be, that's
I think it's
the
the
screen there?
Yeah, this is
I'll
the
be my,
entryway.
Because of the
yeah, I'll be my
microphones, I think
normal
it
spot
becomes
over
hard.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jim will be.
Yeah.
No,
So are you
no,
not
no.
gonna be sitting
Your
with us?
normal spot is over
Yeah,
here.
normally the select board are this way. and they're
Okay,
over
yeah.
Here. So we're gonna be looking at the screen.
Right. Yeah, I'd set it, because I have to have, we're gonna have
So-
to have my,
So we're gonna
probably
sit
right over
during
here
the
somewhere so I can get
presentation?
a,
The seats
still,
aren't
I
like
still
this?
have to get a good
No,
view
they're not
here.
big.
Yeah, and you got
Yeah.
outlets along the wall.
Okay.
Right.
So the
People
camera
are going to be
will
shocked when they see that we're actually normal height.
I know. They're like, wow, they all.
Or maybe there's just like one less chair there or
They're
something.
not.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not children.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
Would you like me to send you a photo of this?
Can you clean it up and put it to scale?
Oh, yeah. I'm getting my CAD program out. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
I have an idea.
That was useful. Thank you for remembering that.
You could have brought it up.
And
in
we're
the
not dealing with,
administrative.
we're not, are we answering public questions? Or, now what was the deal with this, or is this listening?
I think my only concern is I would like us to avoid saying what we're
Right.
going to recommend
Keep it general.
because we don't know that yet, right? So
What
we,
you're considering is what we're doing.
Right.
we
Okay.
can talk about what we're considering. We can talk about the process we've had so
Perfect.
far.
Okay.
You know, if people have like concrete questions on when do you meet or whatever, I'll answer those things. How does the process work? But just not give the impression that we've made final decisions on
I think
anything.
governance is pretty solid.
Great. We're not going to say that.
No.
So, Jackie, I can see somebody coming up and say, "Hey, are you guys going to consider X, Y, and Z?" And maybe you just redirect them and say, "So, are you saying that you would like us to consider that?" So it doesn't have to be a question and answer.
Yeah, I mean, we're considering all input from the public,
Yeah.
and we encourage you to make a comment.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But we're not going to have a back and forth about the whether or not one particular recommendation is better than another or something.
Agreed. That this forum is not the time for us to deliberate on these topics.
Yeah. Cool.
I don't think anybody's gonna do that.
I just need how many beta blockers it takes, so I'm done with
Great. Any other questions about the forum?
And you will have Nancy Lively as your minute taker.
Oh, right on.
She will be at the table with you.
Okay.
Nancy Lively takes excellent minutes.
I have heard that.
Every week.
She does.
it's no competition. Come on.
All right. Upcoming agenda. I think we agreed that we were going to look at governance again next week. I think we'll probably also want some time to digest the public forum and discuss that
Yeah.
again next week.
That keeps us busy.
Yeah, that's probably enough in addition to any new public comments that come in, which, who knows
Yeah.
what that's going to look like in a week.
Regarding Nancy and her excellent minutes, because
Does she have
each
a
of these
contract?
comments are going to effectively be a new public comment coming into us, are we able to get a transcription of that following the recording so that we can address each of them individually as
We will have it
necessary.
on Cat TV, if nothing else, but, or do they need to come into the comment section of the town website?
Well, if people are making comments at the forum, Nancy will have those comments in the minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
She will-
Yeah.
And you will have the minutes before your next meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will we? Because the forum is Wednesday
Oh, no,
night.
you won't.
I can
No,
do
that's
it,
right.
I can do
No,
it
no, it's not gonna
transcribed.
turn them around.
I can,
Right.
I can transcribe from the video.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay.
I just don't let my boss know I can do that.
But so you could get that to us by sometime Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Well, if that happens, great. And if not, then I will review those the following week, I think. Any other items that should be on next week's agenda? Hearing none. Any other business? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you for sticking with this.
Bye.
We
Thanks,
will
everybody.
call this meeting adjourned at 5:04.